Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Indoor Voices. I'm Fiona Queen, Director of Performance Activities at the Music Institute of Chicago, and with me today is a very special guest, Lady Valerie Solti. Good afternoon, where you are, Lady Solti.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. This is me and my dog. Oh, he's rather sleepy. A Boston Terrier called Apollo.
He is lovely. I have dog envy right now. How are things where you are in the UK during this time?
In the lockup. Well,
yes.
It's very strange. And people are beginning to get cabin fever, really. It's strange because you can't just go to see anybody. You're not advised to do that. You have to go out masks. We have our masks everywhere with us normally that we have on, and wear gloves as well.
Yes.
This is quite interesting, I think, because if you look at the old portraits, if you went to the Art Institute and looked at the Impressionist paintings, an awful lot of the women are veiled.
That's right.
Covering up the face, and they're wearing gloves.
It's a remarkable time. It actually feels slightly strange to be sitting what feels like less than 6 feet from you. And I'm enjoying having that conversation without having to be sort of masked and distanced. So,
well, yeah, this is the great thing. Maybe we'll never go back to physically moving around. It'll all be done.
I hope we
on
do.
Zoom or something. Well, I hope we do too. And it's just a very, very strange situation.
And this is a sort of coming.
But it works in its way. You see, but it does work. Yes, you can communicate with people. You can talk to people. You can do things online. I mean, it's very good for musicians or young musicians because they can perform online on Zoom and they'll be seen. I mean, you could audition as well.
That's certainly happening everywhere. And I think I'm very proud of the Music Institute for how quickly the faculty adapted to be able to teach online, to have these sort of group recitals where you just feel like you're still in the concert hall and they still, do the traditional bows. And it's very encouraging to see that. So,
yes.
And where you are now, I think in the UK, though, you're coming up on a big holiday season. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is the holiday. Most people would be away. I mean, every year we would have been in Italy at the seaside. But obviously it's traveling there are no planes available. If you go on a plane, again, you have to go mask covered up and everything. No, it's strange time. And never go on a cruise after we see what's happened with all these poor people that get stuck on cruise ships.
Idea. And I think I read something in the news today that over there that if people are thinking of taking some kind of vacation away, that they're imposing a 2-week quarantine for people coming back.
Yeah, that's right. If you go away, when you come back, it's 2-week quarantine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, looking at the musicians where we were talking about that, it seems I've certainly been speaking to a lot of people that have these major careers, and I think there's a little bit of separation, a feeling of not just being separated from an instrument sometimes or what you can do, but being separated from these great concert halls that
places and the public too.
That's right.
We shouldn't forget that. I mean, the interaction of a public, and it's strange, but well, we're all getting used to it. Look at us now. I mean, seems perfectly normal if you can get the IT to work properly. I mean, that is the caveat in everything. Will it work? But it seems to.
Well, it's certainly, people have done a wonderful job of finding some margin in the middle to be able to sustain. But I do, worry about orchestras and large halls and opera companies.
Well,
How?
it's opera, yeah, because the planning is difficult. Because with the opera companies, you might have somebody, or people would have been probably booked 3 years ahead. That's normally sort of at least a year, between a year and 3 years ahead. And I mean, Solti, we always knew 3 years ahead, more or less, what was happening. But no, it's difficult. Difficult.
Yeah. As a, for booking the concert hall at Nichols Concert Hall, we were
Yes.
already in terms, in the middle of planning for our 90th anniversary season. And then just as with everybody, just shifted all of the planning, everything that we had from March. We had two very impressive jazz concerts that were wrapping up our season, and then a duo piano festival that's in July, and everything just kind of had to be picked up and moved. And I think as we come towards move towards September and a new season, everybody wonders, will we be shifting again? And it's likely, but I'm still booking artists into the next few years. Yeah. So at least that is encouraging, and hopefully we'll have a vaccine to support that soon. So.
Oh yeah, I think so. And I think if it has to be entirely virtual things, it can work. Yes. And I think I mentioned when we had our meeting the other day, also our virtual meeting, that it is possible to do it. Totally possible. We had a performance for the benefit of the London Philharmonic Orchestra the other evening. It was all virtual. And they raised money with it, and there was a silent auction, and everybody, once everybody settled down and got used to it, it was easy. People were able to talk to each other online, providing you remember to mute yourself, because if you don't mute yourself, everybody's talking at once, and then it doesn't work. But yeah, it is adaptable. It's just that I think we lesser mortals, i.e. people like me in my age group, it's difficult to easily adjust to the technology, get it just right. Like sort of when we were going to start, I was on the wrong program. You have to be aware of the limitations.
Yes. But you said it was also very nice because people that you wouldn't normally be able to see at a live event were able to tune in from across the world. And
yes,
I think there's an element of that we're all, it's surprising just how inclusive it can be. So
yes. And I think for self-funding organizations, like most of the US organizations who have to raise the money, it's, you see, you don't have to pay for the hire of the concert hall.
Yes.
You don't have to pay. You don't have to pay for a lot of things, because people don't even have to travel to be there. You can have all sorts of international artists who are all sitting at home in their gardens or in their homes, and you don't have to accommodate them in hotels, because they're all having a lovely time sleeping in their own beds for a change, instead of rattling around. So I think we might find more people than we imagine. Artists are very happy not to have to go somewhere.
I do think there are certain things that I think about concert pianists, and
yeah, of course,
you really need the sound in the hall, and you really need an exceptional instrument. And
yes, of course,
we've been working at Nichols Concert Hall. I'm sort of pivoting in my life right now to figure out an installation for professional live streaming.
Yes,
and it's something I think that every hall should really have this day and age in any case, but this is kind of
certainly now
be aware. Yes.
Certainly now.
I think for people to be able to come and sort of socially distance and play chamber music, or, eventually for singers, I think that's a really difficult question right now, with whether or not you can, project the air, and whether or not that's safe. So.
Oh, that, yes. Well, if you're at home, you see, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. If you're Zooming, It doesn't matter how many germs and viruses you exhale, because you're in your own environment.
So at another, tumultuous time in the last, the previous century, when Solti was a young man, talk
Yes.
a little bit about that, please. Let us know a little bit about that special opportunity that changed his life.
Oh, totally. People who believe in fate, when I first met him, he said, "It is fate." And I said, "Oh, I don't believe in fate. Anglo-Saxon girls don't believe in fate." And of course, I do now, because that's another story. But let's talk about him. He was a very talented young member of the Liszt Academy in Budapest. Most beautiful hall. The hall still gives concerts there, and it is part of the training place in Budapest. It's called the Zen Academia in Budapest. Very beautiful, extraordinary green color, the gilding, the molding. It's a beautiful. Anyway, he was there, and then suddenly things began to be very disturbing in Europe. And he got a job as a coach at the Opera House. And that was fine until one day, when anybody who was Jewish or had Jewish connections was very politely disinvited from their jobs. And so Solti, with many others, as a Jew, was disinvited from his position as a coach at the Budapest Opera House. Now, there was a man he knew who was a businessman in Budapest called Alfred Fellner. And Freddie Fellner, who at the end of his life lived in California. The family had moved later on, but that was during the war years. And Freddie Fellner said to my husband, "Now look here, young man, the clouds are getting very, very dark. You should try to leave Hungary." Now, Toscanini is giving a concert in Lucerne in Switzerland. Now, by chance, again, fate, Solti, as a good pupil, was given a pass to go to rehearsals. And so 2 weeks before, he'd had his pass, and he'd gone through the stage door entrance and waved his pass. And they said, "Oh, you're a pianist, you're a repetiteur." "Yes, the maestro Toscanini's coach is not available. There's a flu epidemic. So do you think you could," Solti is saying, "could you play for his rehearsal, which was the magic flute?" And so he said yes. And he said he went there and went to the rehearsal, and was very proud to be invited to do that. And he said he was playing away, and suddenly he felt a presence behind him, and a voice said, "Bene, bene." It was Toscanini. And he asked him to play in the performances, and asked him to play the glockenspiel, so Papageno, because the glockenspiel, as you know, is a keyboard instrument for that. So he played that for the performances. And it was wonderful. And Toscanini said to him, "Now, young man, when you come I shall be in Switzerland, and if you're coming there, get in touch with me, and I'll see if I can help you." So there was Toscanini, everything collapsing in Budapest. Solti dismissed. Alfred Fellner, gave him the money for a train fare and said, "Now look, get out of here and go to Lucerne, ask Toscanini for a letter of reference, and when you've got it, come straight back here, go to the American embassy in Budapest and ask for a permission to travel." So he went on the train. His father took him to the railway station, And he said the train was there and his father wept, grabbed him. And he said it was so embarrassing that my father, a grown man, should be crying in public. And so he pushed him away and said, "Oh, Papa, don't be silly. I'm fine. I'm all right. I'll be back in 2 days' time." And so he got on the train, said, I looked for my seat. And there was the father on the platform, tears streaming down his face, waving goodbye. And off went the train. And of course, he never saw him again, you know. And so off he went happily to Switzerland. He said it was clean and beautiful and very nice things to eat. And he was having a lovely time. 3 days later, the war broke out. So there he was. He got the letter. Toscanini said, yes, when you come to New York, get in touch with me because I may be able to help you find some work. I mean, what a marvelous offer. And so off he went. And so he arrived in Switzerland, didn't have much money because everything seemed fine and more or less. I mean, the clouds were getting dark, but I think he was so thrilled with the thought of being there, and Toscanini was there. And so that's where he was. And the war broke out. I think this was the very end of August. So let's say it was I think war broke out on the 30th, 31st of August, the day before Solti was there, fortunately, just made it into Switzerland. So there he was with no money, no family, no friends. His parents were in Budapest and everything was sort of locked up and he couldn't move. And so that's how it all began. And he was very fortunate because there was a piano teacher called Irma Scheichert, and she was married to a Swiss. And Irma knew all the big families because she taught their children piano. It was and so she introduced him. And when people had sort of teas and little receptions, Solti would go and play. And so he was very fortunate because she recommended him to a family, the Baer family, who were a banking family of Julius Baer, the still big banking firm. And so he was able to live on the fees from the piano lessons he gave from the children and to other people. And that's how his life in Switzerland began. But he was terribly lucky because the whole thing was a lock-up situation, but because anybody anywhere could have been invaded at any time. And he said at night they would hear the trains down in the valley going through with all the arms and armaments and soldiers passing through down below. And so there he was in the Swiss part of Germany, and then went over to Zurich. And he got another message to say, Irma Scheichert knew all the Hungarians. You see, there's always the Hungarians know each other. The Hungarians, they were sort of a network. And there was a man who was in charge of the denazification program in Bavaria. And his job was to replace any fascist with things that were acceptable to the Americans or programs or what have you. And he was called Edward Kieleni. He was American, but Hungarian, obviously, with a name like Kieleni. And interestingly, he became eventually in his life head of the music school, I think in Cincinnati or somewhere like that. And so that was the fate, Solti's luck, that Irma Scheichert presented him to the right people, and that he was able to survive because he could have been put out over the border at any time. It was a very, very uneasy, desperate time for most people. And so that's how Solti's life began in Switzerland, and Switzerland really became his adopted home after that. He was enormously fortunate. His father died of diabetes. his mother, they lived in this apartment house near the Liszt Academy, and his mother was hidden by the concierge, paid the concierge money, and she was hidden there. Lily, her daughter, was all right. I don't know what Lily, or maybe she was with her mother, I don't know. But his his brother-in-law they all had to wear, any Jews had to wear a star.
Yes.
Had this star, and they were picked up off the street, loaded onto lorries, given shovels and things, and I mean, just picked up in the clothes they were wearing and taken off to the Russian front. And when things got bad, they were just abandoned. I mean, so there was all that going on. Now, back to Solti, who discovered that there was the Geneva piano competition. And so he applied for that, got into was accepted by the competition. And I should know, but I can't remember what it was he played. But he said, whilst he was warming up, he was just practicing. He said, I knew it all so well, I didn't bother to take the music. And this is a lesson to all of us, but particularly to music students, take the music with you. So he forgot to take the music, and he got to one part, and he said he was going, and suddenly he couldn't remember what came next. And so he thought, well, somebody must go to my lodgings and get the music for me. And at that moment, they opened the door and said, Solti, you're next.
Oh.
And so he had to go on. And he said, fortunately, the muscle memory carried him through.
Yes, I think most of us have experienced that as musicians at some point, or unless you have that sort of gift of being able to improvise your way back to or across the bridge to the next part. So,
yeah, I know. So that is a lesson for all music students, all musicians. Take the music with you. Take the music with you. And he won the competition.
That's phenomenal.
So that gave him a little money and recognition, so that the Swiss authorities knew that he was a musician. He wasn't just...
Seems like he's been
somebody pretending to be a musician, but he...
it seems like he was extremely, as you say, fortunate, but that these stepping stones were there, leading from one thing to the next and away from danger. Exactly.
Yeah. And peril. I mean, he was just enormously fortunate, and he never forgot that. Never forgot it. But he was always aware of what might happen. So he always had in his pocket, put his hand in the pocket, there was always a sticky sweet or something that had been there a long time, or biscuit crumbs. So what's that? He said, it's proviant, meaning just in case. It's the rations, the iron rations, in case I need them. So it seems remarkable that. But that was him.
All the young conductors now, as talking to you today, there's also this connection to the Solti Foundation US that provides grants to young American conductors, sort of at the start of their careers, but the very professional side of their careers. A lot of them have already had a certain amount of success, but it's this opportunity that we're talking about, that even small gestures or financial help in some ways, it shouldn't be underestimated just what a big impact that can have on somebody's life. So.
Oh yes, well that's why I'm so pleased and so happy and grateful to you all for supporting me in that, because it is invaluable when you don't know. We don't know. We talk and we say, oh, this A, B, C, and D, but you don't know the circumstances always of people, and they might not say. And those grants from the Solti Foundation, maybe small grants, they're never very large grants, because to give you an example, somebody wrote to me and said, thank you for the $500. I was able to enter the competition, and I won the competition, and now I've got a series of 20 concerts, you know?
Yes, exactly. Or
just by chance, by being able to be spotted.
The music scores that they would need to be able to study.
Exactly. Yes. Right. So it's these small grants, not lifestyle grants or anything. It's this to enable them to carry on the profession.
But it is wonderful also with the, you know, the Solti Fellow, the larger $30,000 grant that the foundation has grown. It'll be in its 20th anniversary this year. To almost be looking at the possibility of having given away in terms of grants and awards nearly $1 million.
That's right. It's wonderful. I mean, can you imagine this refugee boy with his proviant in the pocket? How proud he would have been.
Yes.
Because he never forgot, you see. That's the point. Never, ever forgot. And you know, we'd say to people, I mean, it was always made us laugh because there was somebody whose husband died, and he went up to this lady, not knowing that she was the widow of an industrialist or somebody with enormous means, financial means. My dear, are you all right financially? As he must have heard people saying that. But that was him. I mean, people thought of him as a fierce man. He wasn't at all. He was the most gentle person and always very considerate about people's needs. Now, of course, when he was on the podium, he was the servant of the composer. And as a servant, he wanted to do the best for his composer. So he could be tough with people. But that was why, because he wanted to fulfill the artistic, the musical instructions.
At the highest level, yes.
At the highest level.
I remember seeing him because one of the first jobs that I had when I moved to Chicago was to work for the Civic Orchestra of Chicago.
Oh, yes.
Still there. So the strange connective tissue in my life is that I worked for the Civic Orchestra on one side of the building for half of the day, and then worked for the symphony chorus for the other half of the day. And that's where I met the Solti Foundation US Artistic Awards committee members, Dwayne Wolfe, of course, and Elizabeth Bucari. So
Elizabeth is a star. Elizabeth Bucari, well, all of them, Dwayne. I have to say now that really I am so grateful, and Solti would have been, for the enormous support and devotion of the members of that committee. They're all volunteers. I mean, this is the wonderful thing in America. So many charitable organizations are enabled by people giving their time. And I'm so grateful to these people who've carried on Solti's dream.
Yes.
That's what he wanted. And yes, just to enable people to hear good music, to enable people to make good music. And Solti was tremendously lucky in his life, you see. He worked with Toscanini. One of the first jobs he had, he must have been terrible, actually. One of the first jobs he had, Anton Dorati, who was then later on was a friend. His uncle was in the orchestra of Budapest, and had told him about this talented young man, and if he could be helped. And so Tony got him a job, because I think Tony must have had the job as well, conducting the London Philharmonic Orchestra in 1938, I think, who were giving performances of the ballet, with the ballet Russe. They were hired in orchestra to do the music for the ballet Russe program. And so that he did. And he said, I was in London and it was full of strange people and I didn't like the food and the weather wasn't very good. And that's what he said about it. On the last night, he'd struggled with the tempi all the time because he had to, the certain things went. And so the idea of sticking to the score wasn't. You had to accompany the dancers. Mm-hmm. And on the last night, he decided, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to conduct it as written, the tempi as it is. And the stage manager whispered to him as they were taking his last bow, get out of the theatre quickly, otherwise the dancers will lynch you. And that was typically him, you see. Following the what was written. So the audience coughed and ruined a bit and things like that. He got the reputation for being, it wasn't that he was short-tempered at all. He was a very level, gentle man. But when it came to music, he could be really ferocious.
What advice do you think he would give to young conductors and young musicians during this time where everybody sort of had to hit the pause button?
Well, I think he'd say practice, practice, practice. He would say you have Zoom. Zoom, you do Zoom with your colleagues. Practice, practice. He would say, I'm sure he'd say that. Use the time well. Use the time to study, look at new pieces, prepare yourself, because you never know when the call might come. I think that would be the thing. Yes. But he always felt you had to know the scores very well, not just to be able to conduct by heart, which he didn't do, actually. He always had to have the score with him, he felt, because after the experience in Lucerne and forgetting what went next in the competition in the piece he was playing, I think he would say, use the time well. Study, look at new pieces. Yeah.
Hope that all of the students at the Music Institute who will hopefully watch this will take that advice also.
Yes. Well, it's a good thing. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So, what was it like when you first met him? Your impression?
Well, I didn't know. I was, in Parsifal, they call Parsifal the Reiner Tor, the innocent. You see, I was working for the BBC. I was doing interviews, and I had a cultural slot for 5 minutes in the news. So that was very important for me, that. And I always recorded on a Saturday morning. No, it was pre-recorded for transmission on Monday night. And so there I was on Friday, and the piece I was going to do, for some reason, I can't remember why, was not available. So it wasn't there. And it was Friday, and I knew it was transmission on a Monday. It had to be prepared for Monday morning. And I thought, what on earth can I do? Because I'm not going to get an item in time. And so I rang a friend of mine who was the sister of Andrew Porter. Andrew Porter was one of the great music critics on the Financial Times. And I rang Sheila and said, Sheila, I haven't got an item for this week. It's died on me. I can't remember. It was something and the material wasn't available. And so she said, well, there's always Solti. Now, at this stage, I'd really not seen very much opera. I grew up in the English provinces, which now has, where I was born in Leeds, now has this wonderful opera company called Opera North there, which George Harwood founded and set up.
Yes.
And so Opera North. And so I didn't know anything about anything. I'd seen a performance of Electra when I was staying with friends in Germany. And as a student of drama, because I'd been to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, there were these people singing in German, which I didn't understand, singing music, which I didn't understand, wearing horrible costumes. And was supposed to be some sort of classical thing. And I thought it was dreadful. So I said at this first meeting with Solti, I'm awfully sorry, but I'm afraid I'm not very well versed in opera because I haven't seen much of it. Because I once saw a performance of Electra, and it just put me off opera, and so really never go to see opera. And there was a twinkle in these brown, extraordinary eyes of his, and said, "Which year was this? Where was it?" And he said, "Thank you, my dear. I was the conductor." So that's how it all began.
Honestly,
really.
the start.
Trust me. So I was the Rainator, so I had to learn. I knew a great deal of singing, and my father was a voluntary church organist. The organist used to nip out to the Primrose pub next door during the sermon, and one day he got knocked over, and so my father, who'd been a pupil of this man, took over, despite his youth, they said. He wasn't terribly young. Well, I suppose he was in his early 20s. So Daddy took over at St. Michael's and All Angels in the village of Buslingthorpe, which was one of the little industrial hamlets by the Aire River, where the water was very soft, and so they did a lot of it was a weaving centre. Did a lot of cloth manufacture there, and so there, St. Michael's and All Angels was where it began. And my uncle George Lee used to pump the organ for my father, and of course Daddy married George's wife Annie, and so that was me, and that's how I happened. And so that was my musical context. So I could sing Jerusalem and all the great Parry, knew Parry very well and all that. But opera, I didn't know anything about at all. And so there it was, the twinkle. Thank you very much. I was the conductor.
Well, and then for the rest of his life, you had the best teacher. So
I did. He was wonderful because he'd you see, Daddy used to shout to me while he'd be practicing a bit of Parry or whatever the anthem was going to be for the following week. And my father would shout out to me, "Now listen to this, old girl," and play me little pieces, you see. So that was really the extent of my musical knowledge, because I never terribly wanted to go to concerts. I certainly didn't want to go to opera because I didn't know very much about it at all. And so I had the best teacher in the world, and I learned it on the hoof. He used to give me a score and say, "Now follow that." And so there I'd be trying to follow the score, but if the tempest changed, I mean, I knew if I lost my place, I could find it again with the timpani. So if there was a cymbal clash, or there was, I could reorientate myself on this journey. But that was it seems extraordinary, but that was my total experience and knowledge.
Well, your experience in the world with all of the organizations and the people you've helped, organizations from the World Orchestra for Peace to the Solti Foundation in Europe to the Solti Foundation US and in the United States. It's remarkable, the work that you do. We're all very
I enjoy it, and I've had a wonderful time. I mean, look, wouldn't everybody have wanted to be with Solti and hear this marvelous music and meet Bernstein, for example, who called me Madame Mont Blanc because we were at a dinner or something, and I was sitting next to Lenny, and they said, "You've got a pen?" Somebody wanted his autograph, so I gave him my pen, which was a Mont Blanc pen, and so he used to call me Madame Mont Blanc. And one day when we were coming back on our journey from somewhere, Lenny was just leaving in a wheelchair. It was when he was quite infirm this time. And he shouted his hands, "Hello, Madame Mont Blanc."
It's stuck.
I was Madame Mont Blanc. And no, he was a lovely man and marvelous, you know. And of course, I mean, his music was just amazing.
Incredible, yes.
But I wasn't. I got better on things, and I did learn much more, obviously. And I'm passionate about music now and want other people to share in it, which may be tiresome for them, but I have. I think I'm, you know, I've got the passion of a convert.
It's working.
Worked. It's worked. And of course, what an instrument to listen to, the CSO.
Oh my goodness.
So much.
So
Yes. Bruckner, that was the thing. Bruckner 7 was the first time, which was wonderful. I loved that, with the CSO playing that. And the virtuosity of the Chicago Symphony and the enthusiasm of the Chicago world people. I think that's the other wonderful thing, this enthusiasm, and all these orchestras, small orchestras in Chicago. And of course, marvelous people there. Think of the orchestra. There are many people. Victor Eitai, for example, and Sam Maggard, and well, you know, Betty there working, and Dwayne working with fabulous choir, fabulous chorus.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the place.
Right, exactly.
You want to hear good music? Go to Chicago. Yes.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. And thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking with you again at the Solti Foundation US and in the fall for the 20th anniversary there. So.
Yeah, gosh. And you know, as again, I'd say I'm so grateful to all the people who have supported the memory. And you know, the person I've got to mention is Karen Kanalakis, who was a Solti Foundation grantee.
Yes.
And she is now, has had the most brilliant career. She's conducted at the proms, and she's now just been appointed to the London Philharmonic Orchestra. And marvelous. I mean, she's very beautiful, but she is a wonderful musician. Yeah. And so that is very, very pleasing. Yeah. So thank you to everybody. You all did it, not me. I just trot along, you know, like Mrs. Punch in the Punch and Judy show.
Well, thank you again, and really appreciate you being with us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.